Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Walk the Block. We are navigating digital finance altogether. We have a very interesting show for you here tonight, largely because everyone's favorite organization, the SEC, has announced what they're calling Project Crypto. We're going to be talking about everything going on with that, including the major press release, and we have a quick clip for you from the man himself, Paul Atkins, the current chairman of the SEC. But more importantly than that, we did indeed just have a Fed meeting last Wednesday on July 30th, and to no one's surprise, we held interest rates exactly where they were. So apologies to the crypto folks that were hoping money printers were going to turn on to pump the markets, but you got to wait at least 45 more days until the next one. And it looks like people are heavily betting that that is going to be the first one where we actually see rate cuts. Goldman Sachs even jumped in on this point and has something to say on the matter themselves. But outside of that, we are just very glad to be with you all again tonight. I'm your host for the evening, Zenith, and I'm joined by an excellent friend of mine and really good team member here. He's a guy that does a lot of business interactions and keeps a very keen eye on the market. So we're happy to have Dace. How you doing, buddy?
Zenith, I'm great, my friend. Glad to be here. Keeping very busy, but like you said, the rate cut news has made a lot of noise this week, and we follow something called the CME Fed Watch indicator, which predicts what will happen at the next meetings. And so, between watching the existing meeting play out and then watching some of those numbers on what people think will happen into the future move around, it's been an interesting week to watch.
It definitely has. One of the particular oddities about this Fed meeting is that Jerome Powell came out, did his fancy press conference, and then literally the next day they released some revisions to the job estimates for the economy, and they were revised down pretty heavily. People are saying that this might be the largest revision since 2009. I personally think that there is another revision in very recent memory that they're overlooking, because I think that the legacy media just would like to smear Trump at every stance they can. But we'll try to take a neutral stance and actually look at the numbers and figure out what the heck is going on. Because if you look at Thursday and Friday of last week, those were big red candles on the S&P 500, and the jobs market was the reason for it. So that being said, that is also part of the reasons why we're anticipating rate cuts in the near future, but we'll talk to that when we get that. Regardless, I do want to open up with something that may or may not be some very good news to people, depending on who you are and what side of the fence you fall on, which is none other than our boy Jim Cramer has come out of the woodwork to announce that I always despise both August and September, just tough months to make money. So for everyone out there, yes, we do believe the inverse Jim Cramer rule over here. So, well, the internet fortune cookie right here is saying that August and September could be some pretty good months if Jim Cramer is wrong, which he has a decent track record of it. But yes, this is coming from Ash Crypto. He says the market pump is now confirmed. Dace, how do you feel about August and September? What's your outlook for the next 2 months?
You know, it's funny we mentioned specifically August right now, because if you go back and look at August, we talk about the 4-year Bitcoin cycle fairly often. If you zoom out on Bitcoin's chart, you can cut it fairly neatly into 4-year movements. And if you go measure in 2017, and then 4 years later in 21, and also all the way back in 2013. So every 4 years, 13, 17, 21, and now 25, we're expecting a big green candle in August for crypto, because all of the other past Augusts of those years were incredibly green. And so it is very funny to have Cramer coming out and saying that it's hard, it's a tough time to make money in the markets. Cramer is almost like an indicator of where the market is the current sentiment, right? And so, once the current sentiment has become so mainstream and so dialed in that it's prevalent enough for him to tweet about it, chances are we're about to shift in another direction. That's what the trend typically indicates. That's why people follow what you've said, the inverse Cramer law, where if he says go left, you go right. And so, yeah, there is some interesting history behind this particular one from Jim, because August of Bitcoin bull run years has historically been really, really nice. So it's going to be a funny outcome, I think, either way.
That's true. And speaking of which, we do have the data here from CoinGlass. We are looking at the quarterly returns of Bitcoin and Ethereum. Quarter 3 of the bull years, it's looking pretty good. 2017 for Bitcoin, 80%. 2021, 25%. 2025, already 7%. For Ethereum, 2017, about 10%. 2021, 31%. And We're already looking at 50% for this year, but let's get it even a little more granular. Coming down to August. Yes, largely there's a lot of red boxes here, but you may notice a bit of a pattern, which Dace just pointed out. 2013, up 30%. 2017, up 65%. 2021, 13%. As of right now, it is down less than 0.5% for the month of August. I know, yep, we're a whole 4 days in, so we'll see where we go from here. There may or may not be a Bitcoin's dip that was, in my personal opinion, largely created by some correlation with the job market and the overall investing environment based on the job report information and the Fed meeting that happened. But we'll break that down in just 1 second. Overall, though, good sir, I think you're spot on the money. I'm expecting August to be green. And it's interesting, though, because when we're looking at the data, September actually goes slightly red.
I'm nervous about September, brother, because, and also traditionally, if they do go ahead and cut in September, traditionally the cuts have coincided with, their rate cutting because something is broken in the market. If you back up to previous rate cuts, the market bleeds on the cuts and it obviously runs after. And so, the interesting thing that I've been talking about with some of my close friends that watch this stuff a lot is because of how Jerome Powell has acted. He's acted so incrementally, and Trump memes him as being too slow quite often, like almost daily. Because he is acting in such a methodical, I don't want to say the word conservative, but such a methodical way. Will the market sniff out his cut? Right. Well, we all know when Jerome wants to do it because he's waited so long to do it that we can see it coming. And therefore, the dip on the cut isn't really that much of a dip. We just keep climbing as people, the edge in the market changes and people front run moves that they've seen before. But like you said, I'm more confident for August than September. I'll say that.
That's fair. I just think that looking at the data here, it is interesting that September in the bull run years it's red, which seems a bit odd. But what we're looking at this year is we have our Fed meeting coming up mid-September. So that's the next one coming up. And like we mentioned, that's possibly where they're going to cut rates. In fact, a lot of the market is betting that they're going to cut rates. But it's interesting that we get that. And then it also somewhat coincides with the crypto 60-day cycles because we do have a potential cycle low candidate for pretty much Saturday, Sunday of this last weekend, meaning that 60 days out from here, that's the end of September, which could be another 60-day cycle low for crypto as well. It's not going to be like a bear market or anything, but it's just going to be a small correction to the downside before it moves into the next cycle. So I just find it fascinating that all of these things are lining up quite nicely. And I mean, odds are it's possible that we could maybe hit a cycle high end of August, early September, and then find that cycle low towards the end of September. So yeah, mathematically, if you measure it precisely from September 1st to September 30th, yeah, it could be red. But at the same time, though, that's not necessarily a bad thing because it's just normal market fluctuations at that point.
Well, and like you said, if it's a small correction and August crushes it, it's still not a segment of time you want to be out on.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like if we look at the data here, just going back 2013, August was up 30%. Bitcoin is down 1% after that. Cool. You still locked in 29% gains. 2017 up 65, then down 7. Cool. That's still 58%. 2021, 13 and 7. It's still about 7% gains. So overall, that's nothing to shake a stick at.
Yeah, that's why over all the cycles, you've had people come out with memes like hold on for dear life, hodl. You've had people say that, founders and holders are the people that make money in crypto. They are making axiomatic statements about what we're talking about right now, that, you got to sweat the volatility in the short run, but it's tough to beat the performance in the long run.
That's very true. Alrighty, well, let's talk about the underlying reason why we're seeing what we're seeing. Let's look at the data here real quick. I got the S&P 500 pulled up. Yes, you'll notice that on Thursday, it did start off by making a new all-time high at about $639 and some change. And then we pretty much closed red for the day. And the next day, we had a big gap down to a local low of about $619 before today, rebounding up to just about that halfway point or almost the daily close from Thursday. So it looks like the data from Thursday and Friday was absorbed by the market towards the downside. But at the same time, the recovery appears to already be starting. That's what I'm seeing anyways. And I happen to think that Bitcoin mirrors this very well. we've been pretty much sitting in a consolidation phase for about 2 weeks here after hitting that new all-time high on the 14th of July. Went up to about $123,000 and some change, and then pretty much just crabbed sideways. We did have that one wick down there where we broke down below the 20-day moving average, but Thursday, very similar to the S&P 500 chart, but no gap because crypto's 24/7, baby. So came back down, touched that 50-day moving average, and we went back up, and we're starting to recover, sitting at about 115,000. So it looks like that 50-day moving average did act as support, along with what is effectively our old all-time high back here in May. So just looking at the charts, I think that this is some decently bullish behavior because it's recovering nicely. We're flipping old all-time highs into new support levels, and this is the stuff that gives me confidence that we're going to be going higher. Additionally, if we flip over to the RSI, we did technically have a higher low than the previous cycle low here, which, again, building confidence that we're not getting more into that oversold territory. But overall, I think it does line up with what it is. As far as the reasoning for everything, though, trying to do a little bit of Googling to find some good articles on it, it's a little bit hard to do because Google enjoys just kind of trying to find articles that dump on Donald Trump because they don't like the guy. But we can turn to our good friend ChatGPT. So the news on Thursday was we had revisions of job market data. So originally in May and June, they estimated that about 145,000 jobs were added to the economy each month. Those numbers were revised down very largely, pretty much all the way. So we ended up with only actually adding 20,000 jobs in May and 14,000 jobs in June. So 125,000 correction to the downside, 133,000 correction to the downside. Overall, for a 2-month period, that's 250,000 jobs that were overestimated by the government there effectively. They're saying this has been the largest downside adjustment since 2020. But if you remember, if you've been following the DGen Roundtable, where we also stream over there, we talked about this back in October and November of last year, which is that during that time, there was actually an estimation of, or an overestimation of about 750,000 jobs. The final numbers only ended up being 600,000 jobs. So is the 2-month data worse than pretty much our entirety of 2024? Yes, if you really factor in that short time frame, but this kind of stuff does happen a lot with the government data because it's estimates, and we're not going to get the real data until later on. So is it a good thing to happen, having an overestimation of jobs where you effectively ultimately added, what was it, like 35,000 jobs over a 2-month time span? No, that's not great. At the same time, though, the grain of salt here is that this stuff happens and that we understand that it does. So we're trying not to lose our cool over it. Overall, I think that the market kind of shows that exact sentiment, which is, if we go back to the S&P 500, yes, the data was taken in, it dropped accordingly, but it's starting to recover, just showing that, yeah, we understand it, but at the same time, there are so many other factors going on with the markets right now. So overall, yes, this did come out after Jerome Powell chose not to reduce interest rates because the things that he looks at are unemployment data and inflation, and then also GDP growth is kind of a third fact into there. But the dual mandate of the Federal Reserve is to maintain full job employment and stable prices, aka unemployment rate and inflation data. Our inflation sitting at about 3.1%. The unemployment rate is about 4.1%. And as Jerome has talked, apologies there. Google Chrome decided I was using too much RAM. Thanks.
Oh, no.
Appreciate that. Anyways, what I was saying was,
Yeah, we were talking about the dual mandate that the Fed has between employment and inflation, right?
yeah, as it stands right now, is inflation where we want it to be? The answer is no. We're still sitting at about 3% inflation, which is 50% higher than where it should be. But at the same time, the overall trend is towards the downside, and employment has been largely flat at about that 4.1, 4.2% level. And Jerome Powell has been on record in many press conferences in the past talking about what he believes that this is an appropriate level of unemployment for what he believes is a healthy economy. So because of that stuff, he's not been very eager to do rate cuts at all, even though back at the end of 2024, they talked about doing 4 rate cuts this year alone. This is some of that new information we might be looking at here. And by all accounts, people are saying that they're calling for rate cuts here in the near future. You think that's coming, or?
I do. You know, earlier I mentioned like This is something that me and Agent Jay covered extensively over on Walk the Block, and also at Degen Roundtable. We had a free broadcast this past week um, where we spoke about this a long time. And Jay's got a really good way of putting this effectively. Like you said, a lot of people on in Trump's camp, and in the camp of we want rate cuts are saying what you said. Why have we not gotten rate cuts yet? You guys forecasted them, and we're halfway through the year. Jay responds with, why are they going to cut if they don't have to? Right? Like if things are going okay, if nothing's broken, they're not going to play with it. And so in this case, the thing that's breaking is the cooked labor market data, right? Like the unemployment numbers will wind up coming back around and being the catalyst because they found ways to mitigate, the other end of their dual mandate. They found ways to do stealth QE, and they will, they'll do whatever they have to do to mitigate the other side of the mandate. And it's, well, I mean, both sides of the mandate, right? We had a revision, and it was a 95% revision. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that it will be a catalyst, to answer your question succinctly. I think it's easier for them to control one side of the dual mandate than the other. And it's taken a long time, but the other side is finally sort of rearing its head against them again.
That makes sense. And again, the reason that we talked about this stuff, is there kind of major macro events that can move the markets any given direction based on what the Fed does, what they say, and how the market feels about both of those things altogether. So it has the ability to pump all the kind of the markets, including the S&P 500 and the crypto markets. And additionally, one of the things that we've seen in the past is that when they turn on the money printers and they go to quantitative easing, that typically has lined up very nicely with Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency performing very well. And that's also because it's an asset class. In times where money is easily available, people invest in assets to effectively protect their monetary value from inflation that is bound to happen as a result. Crypto just happens to be a little more volatile, meaning that instead of getting 20 or 30% home increases, we can almost get what is effectively a 2x on the crypto market as a result of such. So that's why we're paying attention to this stuff.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And something to think about is, a good mantra I like is you look at the incentives for anybody's decisions. And so if at this point in the game, traditional finance has entered crypto, right? They have, it's been put on their to-do list, it's on their homework sheet. They got to figure it out. And so as they figure it out, they're going to realize what the rest of crypto culture has realized about interest rates, inflation, these dynamics between QE and QT. If this is the case, and the traditional finance folks who effectively grease the wheels that run our modern culture, are they going to take the loss that comes with which side of the dual mandate is going to fail so that they can start the money printer, right? If they can pick to push off the printing of the money and the debasing of the currency onto the very lower class people, lower income people that they are taking the money from, they can absolve themselves of the guilt. They relieve themselves of any pain of, inflationary danger. It's a win-win for the people pulling the levers, hypothetically. Just saying.
That's true. And again, we talk about this a lot, which is that we're hoping that a lot of the stuff creates stable business environments so that they turn to risk on assets, aka what we're invested in, and we hope pumps because we got in very much early and we've been trying to help other people do just as much. So when we look at that kind of stuff, we also look at the crypto markets, because if we flip on over here to CoinGlass and we look at the ETFs, this is a good reflection of what retail and traditional finance is doing. You'll notice right there, the 1st of August and the day before, the 31st, aka the 2 days that we had this data come out, those are very big red days for the ETFs. This is another indicator that, yes, this kind of data does affect the crypto markets because it's the overall idea of being risk on or risk off, trying to mitigate that risk and figure out if you need to be aggressively investing or aggressively holding back. So because of that, we actually saw it come out in the charts there. So that's the Bitcoin ETF. And if we flip over to the Ethereum ETF, we have a similar effect over here. Granted, it's not nearly as large, also due to the fact that the Ethereum ETF has been on fire lately. But yeah, those two red candles down there, I know they're a little hard to see. Thanks, CoinGlass, for not adjusting this with my Zoom. But yeah, overall, when you get news like that, it just goes to show it does affect the overall market, both crypto and traditional finance. Alrighty. By the way, we We do have some friends showing up. Moonpill Rational Optic is getting into here. He says, "What's up, walkers, navigators?" We haven't decided on the term yet for people hanging out with us, but I like that. And he also tells me that I don't get out of bed or crack a book for anything less than a 3x or 3 times speed. So much appreciated, my friend. Good to see you as always. I hope you were doing well. So final points we want to talk about when it comes to the Fed stuff. We mentioned at the beginning, but here we go. FedWatch tool by CME Group. Next meeting coming up the 17th of September. This looks like the exact opposite of what we just saw for the last meeting, which is we were looking at 95% no cut. Now we're looking at 95% yes cut. And if we even go and flip over to our poly market, we see here 25% decrease in the interest rates. That is at 75%. No change, 17%. And even a 50% basis cut is at 8%. So again, these data sources are taken from different points. The Fed Watch tool uses the futures markets to give those predictions. This one is literally a betting website online. So people are actually putting up their cold hard cash to make a prediction on this. So different data sources, very similar sentiment though. And one final interesting one is that, yes, people are also betting on whether or not Jerome Powell will be replaced in 2025. Currently sitting at about 12%, a bit down from that high. What was that, about 25% there? So overall, that's what we're seeing. And additionally, even Goldman Sachs is weighing in on this, saying that they're expecting 3 consecutive quarter rate point cuts for the rest of the year. So that pretty much looks like September, late October, and early December. And that's it for the year. That would be pretty much 3 for 3 for the rest of the year, which I happen to think that might be a little aggressive. But if it's Goldman Sachs, they may or may not know something that we don't, which is understandable. Do you think they're off their rocker on that one, or do you think they have good reason for it?
Well, again, look at the incentives, right? Just gotta wonder why people make the decisions they do, right? It's always a healthy exercise. I guess I've probably been bold enough when I look at the incentives conversation on the last point, but yeah, look, I think I'm bringing this up because it's going to be an important exercise moving into the future, right? You're going to have banking fusing with crypto. You're going to have the Fed and the National Treasury dealing with crypto. You know, you've got a lot of different incentives and a lot of different angles coming into what's already a more decentralized, like unique monetary environment, you know, against like in comparison to what people are used to. And so I certainly, you know, now I think they think they're doing it for a good reason. You know, who knows if their logic is going to be any good, right? This is new ground for a lot of folks, and so it will be. You know, we watched Germany sell the low. You know, Germany's got to be sick watching the price chart go up. I think they're on like a 2x now if they had a hold, and so do they have a reason? You know, I'm sure Germany had a reason, but turned out to not be a very good one, and so time will tell.
Well, Germany's reason, as we covered back, I want to say that was late May, early August of 2024.
Oh, that's right. It was a forced sell, wasn't it?
Yeah, they had 50,000 Bitcoin, not $50,000 in Bitcoin, 50,000 Bitcoin that by their procedural rules, they were obligated to sell unless they made a major change, which they didn't. But yeah, they sold it for less than $60,000. And well, Bitcoin's back over 110, 115 right now. So
yeah, I guess my apologies, Germany, but also like y'all should have changed the rules, man. That's crazy.
That's true. I mean, look, could they have a crystal ball saying it was going to go up to those highs? No, but at the same time, if you look at the historical chart, it kind of shows that crypto has a tendency to do that kind of stuff. So is it a fumble? I would say yes. We do thank them, though. They did make a nice low on the chart for a lot of us to buy up that low and say thank you.
And I'm sure they made some money. You know, hopefully they didn't dump for a loss.
Yeah, look, they recouped something, but it's just not everything. I will say though, it is you did mention it there, which is that we are looking at potentially things going on chain, and I know we've talked about that a good bit on this show, talking about the possibility of real world assets coming to life and stuff like that. But there's actually one person out there that beat us to the punch and even a lot further than we ever anticipated. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to the head of the SEC, Paul Atkins himself, to hear what he has to say. Let me know if the volume's good. I believe it should be tuned well.
Today, I should like to discuss what Commissioner Peirce, Hester Peirce, and I are calling Project Crypto, which will be the SEC's North Star in aiding President Trump in his historic efforts to make America the crypto capital of the world. The SEC will not stand idly by and watch innovations develop overseas while our capital markets remain stagnant. We're at the threshold of a new era in the history of our markets. As I mentioned earlier, today I'm announcing the launch of Project Crypto, a commission-wide initiative to modernize the securities rules and regulations to enable America's financial markets to move on-chain. The President's Working Group on Digital Asset Markets released the PWG report with clear recommendations for the SEC and other federal agencies to build a framework to maintain U.S. dominance in crypto asset markets. This report is the blueprint to make America first in blockchain and crypto technology. We will not watch from the sidelines. We will lead, we will build, and we will ensure that the next chapter of financial innovation is written right here in America.
There you go, from the man himself. Dace, have you been following this story by any chance?
A little bit, not like I would like to, but some. Look, it's very interesting for sure. So, like we keep saying, this is even more evidence of the reality of a true change in posture and in treatment of crypto, as opposed to it just being a bumper sticker and a campaign promise, right? Every politician delivers some percentage of their campaign promises. I would venture to say that nobody is perfect, and so probably nobody does 100% of them. But there is more and more proof in the pudding every day that this is something that the U.S. government is serious about. That's kind of my zoomed out takeaway.
Absolutely. When it comes to looking at just the headline here for Project Crypto, we will be getting into it shortly. But what I got out of it is that, are they adopting securities rules and regulations that are focused on crypto instead of just trying to shove it into the old box of securities regulations? Yes, I'm very happy about that. The thing that I was not expecting was the head of the SEC saying that they want to move traditional finance markets on chain. That is where they are ahead of even where we were predicting over the course of the existence of Walk the Block. We've been talking about real world assets going on chain for a long time now, but saying that Wall Street is going on chain, that is a step further than I think even we were predicting this soon.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no, right? I mean, I've definitely had the strong banking thesis. I haven't said all of Wall Street, but I mean, those are kind of the same thing. Not the same thing, but they're in the same neighborhood. I can't imagine a world where they're playing, one side is playing in it and the other isn't. And so is it surprising? A little. And it's also, to hear them announce it directly, right, is the big thing. To hear them say, hey, this is the plan. It's also very telling because if you know something about crypto, Bitcoin's not going to be able to house this. Bitcoin can't do that. Like it doesn't have the physical data infrastructure needed to accomplish this stated goal from the government. And so the government's going to pick an L1. I mean, I don't know how that is not a takeaway from this announcement.
Could either adopt an L1, try to build an L1, maybe let the individual markets decide on which L1 they want to use. I mean, at this point, we've already seen some of the largest banks out there actually starting to do their own private transactions on blockchain. I want to say Avalanche was actually one of the chains picked to help that with JP Morgan Chase, if not mistaken.
That's right. Yep. Well, and like you said, they kind of already have, right? When you look at the focus of stable coins on Ethereum, I think it's 60% of all the stable coins in the world. Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest ones on there is USDC, which is backed by Circle, which is backed by BlackRock. So yeah, I think that, like I said earlier, the lines are only going to get blurrier and blurrier as we move forward into the future.
It makes sense to me. I'm just very flabbergasted that we went this fast, this quick, and I'm curious to see what they come up with. So, to take this from the realistic standpoint, all we have right now is we have executive orders from President Trump back in January. We have the Genius Act, which was signed into law early January. And then we have two other bills that are going through Congress, have been partially voted on, but they're not ready for the president's desk just yet. And for those, I'm referring to the Clarity Act and the Anti-CBDC Surveillance Act. Those are the ones that still are yet to arrive at the president's desk in order to be put into law. Now, what we have here is we actually have an announcement from the head of the SEC. Again, it's not law, it's not official rules and regulation, but for anybody that's a former military guy like myself, you know that these are the standing orders from the top. It may not be the exact thing how to do your day-to-day job, but this is how you get the rest of the organization in alignment. This is how you give those standing orders for everyone else to figure out how to do their job to match what the top is talking about here. So again, it's nothing official, it's nothing concrete. But at the same time, though, I do think this is a big step, which is why I'm very happy to see this happening and actually being talked about and promulgated down through the ranks. So with that being said, I do have here for you the official news announcement. That's right, folks, coming to you from the SEC itself on their website, press release from Paul Atkins. And we'll give you a heads up. The entire document is a bit of a lengthy read. In paper terms, is probably about like 5, 6, 7 pages. But overall, it's a lot of good stuff in here. We're going to cover some of it here with you tonight. I am going to skip over some of the fluff and the history stuff, but it is a very interesting thing because one of the reasons that Paul Atkins was calling for financial markets to move on chain, as we just saw in the video, is he actually talks about the previous issues that the capital markets have had in the past, all the different blunders, all the different crises they've had, and how the evolution of technology has allowed them to move to where they are now. What he's calling for is the next step in that. And that's where he believes that moving markets on chain allows them to be open later, longer, and hopefully should be faster and more easily accessible. So that's where we get this section here, evolution of capital markets from buttonwood to blockchain. And again, a lot of good outline of the blunders of the past, but we jump down here to our first section, Forging the Future, America's Leadership in the Golden Age of Finance. So today, I would like the world to go unnoticed that under my leadership, the SEC will not stand idly by and watch innovations develop overseas while our capital markets remain stagnant. To achieve the president's vision of making America the crypto capital of the world, the SEC must holistically consider the potential benefits and risks of moving our markets from an off-chain environment to an on-chain one. We are at a threshold of the new era in the history of our markets. As I mentioned earlier today, I am announcing the launch of Project Crypto, a commission-wide initiative to modernize securities rules and regulations to enable America's financial markets to move on-chain. Just a few weeks ago, President Trump signed the Genius Act into law, ensuring that America will continue to lead in global payments with a gold standard stablecoin regulatory framework. Upon signing the Genius Act into law, I was pleased that President Trump endorsed congressional efforts to pass crypto market structure legislation by the end of the year. I commend the House of Representatives for garnering such strong bipartisan support, and I look forward to working with the Senate as they build off of the House's work and craft market structure legislation that future-proofs our markets against regulatory mischief, cementing the United States as the crypto capital of the world. Yesterday, the President's Working Group on Digital Asset Markets released their report with clear recommendations for the SEC and other federal agencies to build a framework to maintain U.S. dominance in crypto asset markets. This report is the blueprint to make America first in blockchain and crypto technology. That's why the president said last week that he wants, quote, the entire world running on the backbone of American technology. I stand ready to get that job done. That is why I'm launching Project Crypto and directing the SEC's policy divisions to work with the Crypto Task Force led by Commissioner Pierce to swiftly develop proposals to implement the President's Working Group's recommendations. Project Crypto will help ensure that the United States remains the best place in the world to start a business, develop cutting-edge technologies, and participate in capital markets. We will reshore the crypto businesses that fled our country, particularly those that were crippled by the previous administration's regulation by enforcement crusade and Operation Chokepoint 2.0. Whether an incumbent or a new entrant, the SEC welcomes all market participants who are hungry to innovate. At a glance here, how does this sound compared to the previous SEC that crypto was trying to work with?
Man, that's what I was going to say. It's like reading a press release from the Empire, from Star Wars, being like, we're starting a all rebellion, all Jedi program. Like it's so surreal. It's so strange to hear the government speak this way. Like, we're going to make sure America's the best at this. right? Where, what was it, less than 365 days ago, you've got people like Elizabeth Warren and people, the leaders of our country talking about how it's for criminals, Jamie Dimon going on TV slamming it for the same reasons, which is incredible. Yeah, it is quite the turn of posture from our government.
Definitely. I believe Gary's favorite quote about crypto was that it's full of hucksters, fraudsters, and scammers. This is quite a different approach to that, especially when they're willing to talk about Operation Choke Point 2.0 and saying that that was something that greatly hurt the industry. One of the big things from this passage, well, there's two big things in my personal opinion. Number one is the idea that they want to move financial markets on chain. That is a big ask, both from the technical standpoint and from the market standpoint. Technically, that is a big ask because that is going to require a lot of back testing. It's going to require a lot of updates, and it's going to require the entire markets to get with a new technology they have not had. The second here is specifically calling out all the different things that have happened under the previous the previous SEC and the current SEC about where they want to go. Specifically saying that they want to entice people to build here, to start businesses here, and try to get people back into the United States to build it up as the crypto capital. This is the kind of stuff that actually goes from campaign promises to being put into the groundwork to build something from the ground up. So I'm very excited about this.
Yeah, it's it's like anything the government does. It's going to take some time, but it is nice to see things not moving in the opposite direction.
Definitely. So I'm very excited about this. I really look forward to see what they have going on. Some of the other outlets are actually starting to pick this up as well, coming from Cointelegraph. One of the big stories they ran about this piece is that it's the call to reshore crypto companies back to the United States. We even have a tweet here from Scott Bessent. He says, U.S. has entered a golden age of crypto. Under the president, we are now exploring new possibilities in decentralized computing and digital payments to unlock the potential blockchain technology. So start your companies here, launch your protocols here, hire your people here. That sounds like some very good news, especially when we just finished a story about how there may or may not be a lack of jobs in the United States. This could potentially open up a new industry to be pursued inside the United States.
Well, yeah, and if you're a nation state force and you are adopting a new monetary policy, it is in your best interest to state your position that it is in the best position of your whole nation state, right? We're going to put us first. If we're going to do this new thing, never mind that we messed it up before, we're going to do it for us first, for America first. Like that's, it is a wise way to market the change of posture.
Definitely. I think we're also already seeing some movement from this going on, or people possibly kind of read this under the crystal ball and see it was coming down the pike. But Kraken and MoonPay, both US-based firms, have also been expanding their domestic footprint. In June, Kraken moved its global headquarters to Cheyenne, Washington, citing the state's pro-crypto stance. And in April, MoonPay, initially based in Miami, opened a new headquarters in New York City. And in June, it said it secured licenses to operate in all 50 states. This is actual stuff going on the ground here. This is not just press releases from the SEC. This is people who have skin in the game and are trying to build their businesses. They're making moves here. So I'm excited to see more of it. Do you think, how much more do you think we could possibly see? Is there a chance that we could entice Binance to come back to the US?
Well, yes, because of who now works at the top of Binance. I think we have a chance. There was a bit of a seat change at the top when CZ did a stint in prison. And if you Googled the guy's resume that they put in at Binance, you would also think that there's a chance that Binance and the US are more friendly now because he's got lots of past history and work experience working directly with the US government prior to his new spot at Binance. And so I think the answer to that's a yes.
I like it. I love to hear it. I personally think that we will see a lot more building in the United States, and especially for existing crypto companies out there. If you can even get the tax law behind it, and you can create incentives to have people build with crypto and run crypto businesses, I think that that could actually move the needle and get people to make the costly decision of moving headquarters or moving operations. So again, it's a start. We'll have to see what the players in the space are doing. But at the same time, though, everything I've seen from all the news articles we talked about this, I do believe that the market is definitely in tune with what the agencies are saying when they say it, but also slightly anticipating their moves. So we had the Genius Act back in early July, and that was a big win for stablecoins, and particularly a large win for Ethereum because that's where the majority of stablecoins are. There are already people that, as a result of that, are anticipating the next moves and how to act on top of that. I believe we covered a few of those articles 2-3 weeks ago. Anyways, back to our SEC statement here. Is this the one I want? Yes, it is. All right. So back to the SEC statement. Next one, onshore and crypto, a new day at the SEC. Now, Project Crypto will involve a broad range of initiatives across the commission. First, we will work to bring crypto asset distributions back to America. Just talked about that. The days of convoluted offshore corporate structures, decentralization theater, and confusion over security status are over. President Trump has said that America in its golden age and under a new agenda, our crypto asset economy will be too. In line with the report from the president's working group, a key priority of mine will be to establish, as swiftly as we can, a regulatory framework for distributions of crypto assets in America. Capital formation is at the heart of the SEC's mission, yet for too long, the SEC has ignored market demands for choice and disincentivized crypto-based capital raising. As a result, crypto markets pivoted away from offering crypto assets and deprived investors of the opportunity to use this technology to contribute to productive economic enterprises. The SEC's head in the sand posture, as well as its shoot first and ask questions later approach, are days of the past. Despite what the SEC has said in the past, most crypto assets are not securities. But confusion over the application of the Howey test has led some innovators to prophylactically treat all crypto assets as such. American entrepreneurs are harnessing blockchain technology to modernize a broad range of legacy systems and instruments. One such entrepreneur is Senator Bernie Moreno of Ohio, a successful businessman and freshman senator who, before his election to the Senate, founded a company that put car titles on the blockchain. He saw a need for efficiency in transferring titles and devised a practical solution with the new technology. These entrepreneurs need and deserve bright line rules for determining whether securities laws apply to their business. I've directed the commission staff to work to develop clear guidelines that market participants can use to determine whether a crypto asset is a security or subject to an investment contract. Our goal is to help market participants to slot crypto into asset categories such as digital collectibles, digital commodities, or stablecoins, and assess the economic realities of a transaction. This approach can allow market participants to determine, based upon clear guidelines, whether an outstanding promises or commitments of the issuer cause the crypto asset to be subject to an investment contract. In addition, it should not be a scarlet letter to be deemed a security. We need a regulatory framework for crypto asset securities that allows these products to flourish within American markets. Many issuers will prefer the flexibility in product design that the securities laws affords, and investors will benefit from the opportunity to earn distributions, voting rights, and other features typical of securities. Projects should not be forced to establish a decentralized autonomous organization, or a DAO, and offshore foundations or decentralized too early if it's not part of their desired plan of action. I am excited to see these new use cases for crypto asset securities in commerce, such as the ability to participate in blockchain network consensus with tokenized equities.
That's
I gotta say, this was the section that really made me the happiest.
Yeah.
Dude, that was two things here. So first and foremost, we now officially have in writing from the SEC that most crypto assets are not securities. That's a big declaration.
Agreed. That one's big, and then there's one even bigger all the way down, halfway through. Let's see. It gave the example about the entrepreneur. Yeah, that one. That's the one. The one where they say we need to make room for things that are securities. That is like the knife in the heart of all of the crypto bears from last cycle, who were saying they're going to turn off all of crypto because they can't turn off the internet, and they're not going to let us have crypto. That's dead. Like, that's gone. The folks who are saying that ultimately they're going to crack down on everything, the super doomers, right? The turbo bears on crypto. This puts one layer of those guys in the ground. I mean, it's, the argument is dead at this point because they're going to make room for actual securities. They're going to make new rules, and you're going to be able to do what it is that you want on the internet. it kind of boils down to, are they going to take the whole internet from us, or are they going to make rules around it for us? Those are their options. Thankfully, our overlords have decided it's good we get to keep the internet. So they're going to make some rules. That's what it looks like to me.
I agree. The fact that they're talking about having crypto asset securities being able to work within the markets is big. I think that this is big because previously, as you just talked about, when things were deemed a security by the SEC of the run under Gary Gensler, it was kind of, you were kind of dead in the water at that point, because what would happen is that you would be forced into old securities laws that don't fundamentally work with crypto technology, meaning that your crypto asset now becomes an old security and can't operate as a crypto asset. This is very clearly saying that, yes, some of these things are securities, but there is something unique about this technology that is different than old securities, and we have to adjust for it. This means that it's no longer this coin flip of whether the SEC says you're a security or not, and that's pretty much going to determine the life of your project. This is actually creating an opening for both of these things to happen, which is that, yes, they openly admit, we just highlighted it there earlier, most of the crypto assets are not securities, meaning that they don't have to adhere to this old structure and guidance that has really hamstringed the entire crypto sphere before. But now, even the ones that were deemed securities still have a place to go. They still have product market fit. They still have something to do to provide value to the people that have invested in them up until this point. That's massive, because it's no longer just chopping people off at the knees. It's just kind of sorting them into two different piles and saying, okay, this is where you got to work. Figure out how to work there.
That's right. The assumption is that it's okay for you to exist. Whereas less than 365 days ago, we had a guy that wouldn't tell you which ones weren't securities, but would tell you that you needed to assume that all of them were. And that means that therefore, question mark, right? Therefore, there was just this cursed boogeyman hanging up. We're going to take you to court and then not be able to carry out arguments because we don't have any framework to make an argument. And so it was just literally bog the whole system in the mud. That was the strat, until very recently. So it's like I said, there is a whole cycle, 4 years worth of folks who have bypassed crypto and who have said, you know what, that's too risky. It's not for me. The government says it's bad. It turns out this is the manner and means by which they were saying it's bad, which was just, lawfare. And just bogging things down and threatening people. So it's very nice to see.
Lawfare really is the key word there, because lawfare was how things were determined in the past. It took literal court rulings to determine which crypto tokens were securities and not securities. And then even after the fact, the SEC still came out and released a giant hit list of what they believe were securities. So the way that it worked previously was that you had to go to court and fight this stuff, which is pretty costly, I might add. And nothing's even guaranteed because we're all still human at the end of the day. There's different biases and interpretations and how you see the world that can affect this stuff. But what we're getting now is straight from the SEC. This is from the people who were fighting that stuff originally. I'm not going to say conceded the point here, but more of recognized things for what they actually are. So what that does is it removes that entire lawfare element, meaning that people are not going to waste time and money trying to fight this in a court of law just because the current SEC believes that it's something different. So I see this as a massive win. This makes it so much easier to get regulatory clarity and to get the ability to operate your project instead of go hire lawyers and get caught up in a court case that could take anywhere from a year to 3, even 5 years just to figure out what exactly are you and how do we treat you.
Well, and like you said it really well, this is particular. We are so emphatic about this point. Number one, because we were here through this cycle, and we held despite all this news and pressure. But number two, we also know that cryptocurrency, again, if you look at the memes of the past of the people that have stayed, the common stories and the memes and the common handed down tenets are that you hold, right, through the volatility. That's a purveying idea through the culture. And so what I would say is that it's the administration's posture around this lawfare stuff was particularly damaging for crypto because it's so sentiment based, right? Because it's so highly volatile and it does play with people's emotions, right? People are not used to the swings and coming from other financial worlds. And so you've got that added pressure of, your coin is in the news. Your founder's in court, weighing down on you as well. And so it was doubly damaging for crypto because of the nature of crypto and how it works in terms of the human sentiment.
Most definitely. I will say this. I got one more section here I want to point to. So there are some good ones in here. Specifically, he does coin the term super app, where he specifically references things like broker-dealers, rulings, and pretty much allowing alternative trading systems to offer trading in non-security crypto assets along with crypto asset securities, traditional securities, and other services. So specifically what he does talk about in that super app section is giving people the ability to trade in lots of different stuff. Arguably, because the broker-dealer rule was in there for so long, it was a big stymie to centralized exchanges and decentralized exchanges. Under this framework, that no longer exists. So those people have the green light to go. But the thing I do want to talk about here is down at the bottom. So final main section, we have fostering innovation. Commercial viability is our true north. Finally, innovation and entrepreneurialism are the engines of the American economy. President Trump has described America as a nation of builders. Under my leadership, the Commission will encourage our nation's builders rather than constrain them with red tape and one-size-fits-all rules. While the Commission is actively considering industry requests that could jumpstart innovation activity, we are also contemplating an innovation exemption that would allow registrants and non-registrants to quickly go to market with new business models and services that do not neatly fit into our existing rules and regulations. The Commission will continue to ensure that market participants adhere to certain conditions and requirements designed to achieve the policy aims of the federal securities laws. Under my vision for innovation exemption, innovators and visionaries will be able to immediately enter the market with new technologies and business models, but will not be required to comply with incompatible or burdensome prescriptive regulatory requirements that hinder productive economic activity. Instead, they will be able to comply with certain principles-based conditions designed to achieve the core policy aims of federal securities laws. These conditions may include, for example, a commitment to make periodic reports of the Commission, incorporate whitelisting or verified pool functionality, and restrict tokenized securities that do not adhere to a token standard that incorporates compliance features such as ERC 3643. I encourage market participants and SEC staff alike to have an eye towards commercial viability when contemplating what various models could look like. I gotta say, this section right here, I find this very rare to come out of the government, which is that they're actively and openly saying, yes, we don't have rules for you yet. Go ahead and push the envelope. We have some principles we'd like you to adhere to, but go ahead and build whatever you want to build. We'll figure it out later. From the government standpoint, in my opinion, that is very, very rare to see. Do you think people are going to take them up on this?
I think some amount of people will. I think it's hard to say. I think it's funny to say that in crypto, traditional finance is going to lead. But when it comes to the next step of innovation, I think we're going to see a new class. And I have mentioned this angle that a new class of potential banking / DeFi / these hybridized sort of institutions are going to start to pop up. Somebody that comes to mind is OX Coast and Old Glory Bank, right? Where you can go open a real world bank account and then onboard directly to Pulse Chain. So shout out to those guys. Very, very cool service. And so I think you're going to see more and more competition in the finance space. Competition in that space has been protected for a long time. And it's taken this groundbreaking innovation that is linked directly to our free speech to force it to innovation. That's sort of how I view it. And so, we'll see how fast the ball spins. Once these two pieces of legislature get through, if they get through the Senate and get to Trump's desk and get passed, things could change quickly, man. I mean, those are also just as big a deal as anything we've talked about today, in terms of completing the puzzle, right? For the people, the big boys who wanna do stuff. The large players in traditional finance who may rotate in to operate all of their, the SEC, the Senate, the president, they've all signed all of these orders and they've all taken action towards institutionalized crypto products for the people. And so all the rules aren't over the line yet. We've got, I would set it at somewhere between 60 and 80% of the rules are over the line. Once these other two get passed, it will be anybody's game. I think it's hard to say right now, but the picture could change quickly. I've been in the game long enough to know that it's a game of sentiment. And the picture can change from day to day, my friend. So I am excited to see these laws get passed because I think they will be a good indicator of the real sentiment, right? They get passed, and now everybody's free to do whatever it is they would like to do. Nobody's waiting for the state of crypto to change or evolve before they can pull the trigger, spend the money, start the project, whatever that is. And so we'll see new players emerge once the last of these pieces have fallen into play. That's what I think.
I agree with you. The fact that we have pending legislation, I think, is a big thing. It's still unclear, although we have a pretty good picture of what is likely to happen based on the things that are already moving through Congress and going to the president, hopefully soon. But at the same time, though, the point there is that it's not concrete. It's not finalized. So the official rules have not been set. I think that ties largely into what we just read there in that last section, which is that the rules are not largely set. But even this is a change in stance, which is that they want people to innovate and they want to make the rules fit what already exists there instead of make new things fit into old laws. When it comes to what people are going to do in the crypto world, I'm kind of two minds at this point. Point number one is what we've been talking about largely is that this is the ETF cycle. This has been the cycle where we've seen traditional finance really get incorporated into the crypto markets. Traditional finance mentality is really trying to mitigate risk. They don't try to push the envelope as much with stuff, and they definitely don't want to have a lot of downside action that's possible. So from that standpoint, it leads me to believe that we might not see a whole lot of innovation, especially when the regulators are saying regulation doesn't exist yet. We'll figure it out when we go. It's up to you to make your stuff, and then we'll make regulation kind of fit around it or see if your stuff is incompatible with regulation. If you were existing under the previous SEC under Gary Gensler and you got this kind of message, I would completely understand if you decided to do nothing because it kind of feels like a trap, which is that under the previous SEC, a lot of people got burned. A lot of people got sued and a lot of money was spent just to try to keep people outside of the court and outside of jail. At the same time, though, here's the other half, the crypto markets. The cryptocurrency world has shown that it innovates very, very quickly, and it's not afraid of trying to push boundaries on some stuff. Yes, some people did push it too far, and they did get, in my opinion, justifiably slapped with either fines or possible imprisonment for things that are just basic fraud at that point. But I do think that they have a very good way to innovate and to push the envelope when it comes to this stuff. And I think that that is the kind of thing that this really leans into, which is that you're taking the reins off, you're taking the chains off, you're letting people do what they want to do best. And the SEC is kind of like pinky promising here to not sue you to oblivion and just try to make sure that as long as you're doing something reasonable, they will allow it and try to find a way to incorporate it. So those are the competing demands here. And I think that we're going to see ultimately a bit of a power struggle between the two. Traditional finance has massive. They have a lot of capital at their disposal, and they are well integrated into every part of the U.S. ecosystem at this point. Crypto does not have that. But what it does have is the ability to innovate and build very, very quickly. And I'm excited to see what they come up with and excited to see which of these two forces kind of comes out on top. As it stands right now, I might be hedging my bets on the crypto folks. I'm not saying everybody's going to be a winner, but imagine there will be a handful of folks that just hit it out of the park and just hit that home run worth 1,000 points to quote Alex Ramosi there.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, it's, in terms of the technology, we now, it's not now the writing's not on the wall, it's on the press release that the SEC is going to put all of the markets on the blockchain. And so it's us dragging us into the future, not the other way around, for sure.
I like it. Alrighty, that pretty much concludes the end of what we're talking about here today. Outside of that, Dace, where can the folks find you and what do you got going on in the near future? And any final thoughts if you have them, by the way.
Yeah, no, look, it's an exciting time. I think it's going to be much more exciting later in this month, like we touched on at the top of the show. August might be a very fun month to look back on. But, this is establishing establishing week. It's a bit of a calm before the storm. We'll see what happens. The markets today were interesting. I know you had S&P pulled up. I'm keeping a heavy eye on all those, as well as the CME watch. And yeah, every day is a new adventure when it comes to tariff news in terms of the short-term volatility. But like I said, until the legislation gets passed, I think we're in a bit of a holding pattern. And so, no, I will be around. You can find me on X and on Instagram at Dace Northall. Come find me at Degen Roundtable on Telegram and also at Walk the Block. If you go to walktheblockndf.com, I think /subscription, you can find our spot where you can come log in to Telegram, pay for a monthly subscription, come listen to me and Jay do some TA on Ethereum, Bitcoin. We give Crypto 101. There's live Q&A, lots of great stuff in there. If you guys want to go find me, you can find me there, the quickest and easiest.
Love it. Yes, folks, if you want more of the content we're putting out here, head over to walktheblockndf.com. That is where you can find the sign up for our private Telegram community. Inside of there, you can find exclusive live streams like Dace just mentioned, where we're breaking down basic concepts like Crypto 101, or actually deep diving into the markets using some heavy technical analysis to discuss what's going on. I mentioned it earlier on in the show. There is a possibility that the 60-day cycle for Bitcoin has come to an end, and we're in a new cycle here, but that is also competing against other possible cycle counts and potential news events that have not happened yet. So we don't know, but we will give you our best guess and break down what we're using to analyze all the trends going on. All that stuff you can find over at walktheblockndf.com. The waters get rough, so don't sail them alone. Come join us as we navigate digital finance together, private mentorship, exclusive live streams, and Q&A. Go from beginner to intermediate to expert. We're happy to have you because when we all work together, we all win together. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Again, I'm Zenith. You can find me on X and Instagram at ZenithDI. Additionally, you can find us in the Telegram chat as well. If you're in there, please let us know what you'd like to see. We just posted a new Crypto 101 video free on YouTube for everyone to see. That one is covering onboarding, aka making your first crypto purchase. We have another one coming down the pike here shortly, talking a little bit more about going off-chain and actually doing self-custody, what that entails, some security risks, but also the benefits of doing it. So we hope that you guys get a lot of content out of what we do here. But outside of that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here tonight. And until we get you guys next time, I hope you all have a fantastic week. Ladies and gentlemen, good night.